Hey everybody, I'm John Carvalho, president of Divestopedia. I'm so excited for this discussion on acquisition integration. Being able to efficiently integrate an organization is so important for the success of an acquisition. We're going to be talking about planning for integrations and specific areas to focus on so you can be successful when you are acquiring businesses. We have a lot to cover today, and we will address questions towards the end of the hour. As always, my colleague Chrissy is in the background and she will help us field questions. So please enter any questions that you might have into the Q&A dialogue box. We have an amazing group of panelists joining us today. And I'll also say that it's a global group of panelists. HR integration experts from Vo Professional Services. We have Hope Malvo and Miracle Semyon joining us today. And then our post-merger integration experts from Keystone, we have Thomas Wilby joining us. So welcome everybody, thanks for joining us. Hope and Miracle, could you share a little bit of your background and provide an overview for the audience of your firm and your experience and expertise? Let's start with you, Hope.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully you get a lot from this session. We're super excited to be here. So I am Hope Malvo. I am the CEO of Vo Professional Services and the co-founder of Connect Pro. So Vo Professional Services, we partner with companies to help them do post-merger better, do M&A better. That's our focus. It's on people. It's a very approach. You don't have to go on, and Vo Professional Services helps you get there. Miracle.
And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Miracle. Yes, there is a hope and a miracle on the call today. So you are guaranteed for success already. That's our philosophy with Vo Professional Services. We just do it better, and we have a different approach. And we've done 16 mergers and acquisitions together as a firm. So look forward to this discussion, and hopefully we all learn more from each other.
I wasn't going to ask about Hope and Miracle, but it was the universe that brought you guys together, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
it really was.
That's awesome. And then just for our audience, you guys are located where, please?
We're in Houston, Texas.
Okay, and then providing services across the U.S. in Houston. Where do you guys provide services?
Across the U.S. So we haven't quite gone global, but the same issues apply, the same challenges apply in mergers and acquisitions, and we would love to expand our footprint. So we are definitely open to providing services globally.
Awesome. And we have a global audience that joins us here on these webinars. So great that you guys can be here. Thomas, could you give us a background on your firm, your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John. So I'm Thomas Wilby. I'm the founder and managing director of Keystone, which is a consultancy company that specializes in supporting other companies transitioning through the journey of acquisitions. So we come in at the point of, SPAs being drafted and shared, and help navigate companies through the post-merger integrations and everything that it means from a full company life cycle of integration. So we are based out of London, UK, but we support mergers globally. We've had clients across the UK, EMEA, US-based companies, North America, and some APAC companies as well through China and Hong Kong. So we are operating globally.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I'm super grateful that you guys were able to join us today. And again, for our audience here, it really is a global discussion. So my colleague Chrissy has been dropping everyone's LinkedIn profiles for our audience. If you want to connect with Hope, Miracle, and Thomas, you can definitely do that. So let's get right into it. We have a lot to cover. Hope, I'll start with you on just kind of the overview of integration and, the high level framework of what, integration really means. Well, why is integration so important to the success of an acquisition?
Yeah, great question. So an M&A it's often described as the single most disruptive event, and it affects every area of the organization. So if you're looking at an event that's disruptive, you want to consider all the parts that it affects, which for us is people, processes, and technology. And you want to just ensure that those three aspects are considered, so you can minimize the effects of the disruption. And that's why integration is pretty much key. You have to be able to minimize the disruption.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value that's created, I guess, on the back end too, I'd imagine. And that's the whole point of doing an acquisition, is to create value and to capture, the opportunity that you see at the onset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. Thomas, who's typically involved in an integration team? I read somewhere that close to 85 or 95% of all transactions are kind of in that lower middle market space. So I'd imagine that a lot of corporations that are out there doing acquisitions maybe don't have what's called a dedicated integration team to bring two businesses together. But from your experience, from your knowledge of doing transactions, who is typically on this integration team?
Yeah, it's a great question. When we're talking about statistics, we can also look at the one where it says around 70% of acquisitions fail to meet their targets, right? And from my experience, that's down to not bringing in the right expertise when it's needed. So completely agree. Not every acquisition is a mega deal. Some, the vast majority are in that lower to middle market. And you don't need a full bells and whistles integration team, right? I think it needs to be scalable based on size and complexity of deal. But I would always recommend bringing in an integration manager, regardless of size and complexity, somebody with the experience that has navigated these types of deals, to go through, everyone knows their company inside and out themselves, but there's lots of pitfalls along that journey, right? From regulatory and compliance standpoints, from understanding the common areas where synergies can be found and how to maximize the profitability of deals. Somebody whose bread and butter is integration, I would always advise seeking some external consultancy support. Even in a part-time capacity, we often find that we are mobilized through Keystone much later in the process once they've already struggled to integrate, right? So by investing in that key area and bringing the right skill set in as early as possible into that process, would be my absolute recommendation. So like I say, it may just be an integration manager, light touch, but it pays dividends towards the end.
Yeah. So you're saying at a minimum, there should be at least one point person within the organization that is kind of the leader of the integration, and then you bring pieces in as required.
Absolutely. I mean, like I say, it's scalable. I mean, I've been lucky to be part of some mega deals where there are full integration management offices, program directors, program managers, project managers, business analysts, administrators, and integrated PMOs, and that's great. But as a bare minimum, to bring somebody in, just an integration manager with the prerequisite skill sets to an experience to navigate through that process, I would always advise.
Yeah, awesome advice. Miracle, there are so many aspects to an integration. How can a corporation break it down to make it manageable and it's not overwhelming when you're looking at acquiring a business? Is there, are there pillars that you guys focus on within your organization when thinking about an integration?
Yeah, because the whole basis of an integration is about combining and unifying ideas, data, knowledge. When ideas and knowledge come together, you gain insight into a specific problem. And those desired outcomes create a new and greater sum to the individual parts of the two companies. So to make it more manageable, we like to focus on people, process, and technology. And more specifically, the people, because the people is the heart of the business. And the people, that's why it was attractive for buyers to even, buy a specific company or come together, because those people contribute to the overall success. So questions to ask yourself when acquiring a company and rolling into their system, and would it be a disruption and how costly is it? But those are the three buckets we always kind of like to focus on, and always be people focused, because if everyone leaves, there's no business.
Yeah, it'd be hard to run a business if there were no people in it, unless it's a pure technology business, which those are far and few in between. But I love that. I love those buckets. I love people, process, technology. I think if acquirers look at it that way, and kind of focus on those three areas, it's not overwhelming. It's not like, oh my God, how do I bring all of these pieces together? So it's a really nice encompassing overview of that. Awesome. Hey, I want to really get into, the specifics. The reason I love doing these webinars is because I get amazing experts on, and we're able to dive deep and provide real practical advice for people that are kind of in these situations of acquiring a business and trying to integrate them. So let's think about integration at the kind of the strategy development phase. Thomas, I'll start with you on this, but how do you weave integration into the acquisition strategy development? I know you talked about, starting early, getting kind of the integration team established early. A lot of cases you're maybe brought in later on in the process. But how do you really bring this into the strategies and at the onset of even thinking about an acquisition, not actually executing on one?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. It's one I actually get asked quite a lot in Keystone, and again, a lot with these answers, John, is going to depend on the type of company, right? Whether this is the first acquisition you're navigating, whether your USP of your company is growth by acquisition, right? Which I know is a topic that you speak a lot around, John, right? Around companies growing almost exclusively through acquisition in those inorganic fashions. So for me, start preparing for integration at the point you're preparing for your deal, right? One of the common pitfalls we often see is around all the focus is on the deal creation, right? The deal sourcing. It's around the company valuation, writing the perfect SPA for that deal, and that's all great stuff. But the integration is often an afterthought, as is the role that supports it, right? And so I would always advise bringing, even if it's the same team as the M&A team, we often see that there are differences between the two, but integrate them much earlier on in that deal process. Have an integration manager looking over your acquisition strategy through their eyes as an integration manager, right? So you can start detailing a really clear vision on what you want to achieve as an outcome of this deal, right? So what are your planned synergies post-acquisition? What is the scope of integration going to look like, right? You may have acquired a company that's sat in a geographical location that actually your company doesn't currently have a footprint in. So are you going to do a full rebrand? Probably not, because their reputation is probably stronger than yours right now in that geography, right? So developing a clear integration scope to support and drive the ultimate valuation of that deal, right? And the outcome of that deal. What's your business development plan? What's your commercial plan to realize your growth targets? You've got a 6% growth target for that deal. That's great, but how are you doing that, right? How are you cross-selling products between those two companies? How are you mapping your service lines between the two companies? What are the natural synergies that exist between those service lines or product offerings between those companies? And so I would just have at the forefront of your acquisition strategy a very clear approach and plan around how you're going to do that. Because I see, again, too often it's great to have ambitious targets, but unless you've got a real plan that underpins how you're going to achieve that growth target and achieve those synergies, I see a lot of companies struggling to hit those targets. So I think that's an open, collaborative discussion between buy side, sell side, leveraging their experience from their company because it's what they do best. That's why you bought them. And then just committing that to a dedicated plan that encompasses your business development team, your sales function, your marketing, your strategy.
Yeah, your example really hits home for me. The one with the, if you're acquiring a business in a different geography, are you going to integrate them fully? I mean, I was part of a strategic acquire a roll up where that was exactly what happened in our business. We were acquiring businesses in different geographies, retaining kind of the existing management team in those geographies. So our integration didn't need to be as we didn't have to go in there and rebrand and change employees and implement all of our systems because we wanted to use what was there existing. So knowing that we were going to be that type of acquirer really kind of drove our integration strategy and our integration methodology. Miracle, how deep do you need to get into the planning for integration at the onset of a transaction? I mean, Thomas gave a really good overview, and my example or my experience shows that we didn't get that deep into, into the integration when we did a deal. But at the onset, how deep do you have to get into the planning?
It's so important for us. What we do at VO, we kind of take a different approach because a lot of people will kind of go to their clients and say, what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve? But sometimes if you focus straight on your goals, it could be unrealistic. Because of course we want to have I want to hit 100% year over year. Like that's a good goal, but that's probably not realistic. So when we talk to our clients, we want to talk about all the assumptions that they have when it comes to the 3 buckets that we mentioned earlier, people, process, and technology. And an example of that is, tell me who your high potential, your best employee is, and everybody has that person. They can immediately go grab that person. And then we like to challenge them and say, go fire that person. Can you do that? Because this business, this operation will still need to function because the likelihood of that person leaving is relatively high because their roles change. They kind of don't know what's going on. It's that uncertainty that happens post-integration that will cause them to have other opportunities because they're such a good employee. And so you have to think about all of those risks and assumptions you have, and let's talk about it. And that goes back to Thomas' point of planning is so important in the strategy phase because you just doing it later on, it's already happened. They've probably already quit but stayed. They probably, just sitting around a water cooler, just waiting. The rumor mill is flying. So you have to get on top of that as early as possible.
Yeah, those are great points. I've never had a client that had unrealistic expectations. I don't know what that's like. Just quickly for our audience, Christy's been dropping in some PDFs from Miracle and Hope and Thomas around their firms and around their processes on integration. So if you guys wanted to download those, they're great material. We reviewed them yesterday. So definitely will provide a lot of value with those materials. She's going to share them again. She is sharing them again. So everybody download those. Hope, just around, again, integration strategy. Does it really change depending on the acquisition target? Or do you think it stays pretty consistent and kind of tied into the overall strategy that you want to execute?
Yeah, I think the problem with that is you do want a framework, right? And you definitely don't want to go in blind strategy. And there's some key principles and methodology every company will adopt and just kind of automatically go to, but you want to be agile. I don't know if I can stress that enough. You want to be able to change certain things within the strategy on the uniqueness of the integration of the deal. So yeah, I mean, it should be flexible. I don't think you should have the mindset of this is how we do things. As a matter of fact, speaking to those numbers, the 70 to 90%, fail. And if you really want to identify that, it goes back to not being adaptable, not changing, just really kind of, honing in and saying, this is exactly what we're going to do for every deal. And it's around the people issues, specifically morale and culture and just merging these two companies. That's a big undertaking. So you kind of have to go in with the mindset that, yes, this is what we'd like to do, but we're willing to partner to make it work. And there's been some super successful deals that did that. Disney and Pixar was a great example of a beautiful merger that took place. And Disney was like, okay, you keep your culture, you keep everything the same. Well, I'm sure they don't do that for every, merger, but they realize the value there in keeping things the way they were. So you have to be, willing to adjust and change. So.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point of, everybody hears the stats and maybe it's scares people off from actually doing acquisitions around the failure rate, but adequate planning at the onset, and then really efficient and effective execution of it at the the back end of it, would really reduce those statistics and kind of be able to counteract any sort of risk or any sort of anything wrong that might come up with the acquisition. Like there's 100% chance that things are going to go wrong in an acquisition. It's being able to kind of manage those and kind of anticipate them.
Absolutely. I love pulling the skeletons out of the closet, and two, doing a SWOT analysis is a great exercise for companies. Know your weaknesses too when you go into a merger or an acquisition. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, and then you begin your strategy and base it on that.
And also, if I can just add to that, I think, and maybe I'm biased in saying this as a consultancy partner, but I think there is real value in having an external party do that, right? I think people are hesitant to look too closely at the inner workings of their company. Everyone likes to think their company is a seamless organization, and but having external eyes come in, evaluate that company through fresh eyes, and as you said, Hope, start looking through the skeletons in the closet. Truthfully and honestly, I think is a real valuable exercise to be taken at. It's the perfect time, right? You're already restructuring your company. It's a great opportunity to have a sort of drains up review of where you are right now as a company.
And an easy way to do that from the consulting side is ask them why 3 times. And usually it's like, I don't know why we do that way. It was just told to me when I got here. So you always get a question. If, like Thomas said, if they're doing it themselves, they just like, this is the why, and they stop. But you got to ask another why and then another why, and then you get the true answer to why is this relevant or not.
And I think adding to Thomas's point on the value of an advisor, like not only the kind of independent external perspective, but also the deal experience, right? Like, I mean, we have 4 people here that have worked on hundreds of transactions, billions of dollars in value. Like there's probably not a lot that we haven't seen on the, bringing 2 businesses together. So just that, that knowledge of somebody that's been there, done that, recognizes kind of some of the early warning points or potential obstacles, just brings a ton of value. I think that's kind of needless to say, but I thought I would say it anyway.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's move into this kind of next topic I want to talk about on, the due diligence stage. So, you've kind of developed a strategy, you've kind of gotten through the offer, and now you're into the actual weeds of, analyzing this business. Miracle, I'll start with you with this question, but what happens during due diligence to facilitate integration? And, that question will be to your specific expertise on the HR side.
This is a good question because sometimes we have conversations with clients and they're like, okay, when do we bring the HR in? And so the term HR, human resources, sometimes we tell our clients, circle everything that deals with your people. And if that's your purchase sale agreement or the deal in general, and they get to highlighting, it's pretty much everything, every aspect of your safety, your IT department, like all of that deals with people. And so that's why it's so important that we need to be involved from the beginning, because that employee experience is everything post integration. And we can even look at the pandemic, like what was a lot of things was wrong, but one of the things that people always wanted to talk about is when do we get back to normalcy and the new normal and how we get back. So employees have those same feelings. They want to know when will their job or their role get back to normal. And like we all know, any type of M&A is extremely disruptive. So we need to be a part. We need to be a part at the very early stages and facilitate those answers and also those assumptions that we're having early on to kind of come up with a plan, because we know planning is important. Post integration, the execution. You can't do the planning in the execution day one. That's a disaster.
Yeah, I know for sure. I think we're hitting that point home, hopefully for the audience, that it needs to be on early in the process. Hope important areas in due diligence to think about with regards to employee matters. Like, can you just talk about like some of the more important areas that need to be explored and really investigated when doing due diligence, specifically around kind of employment?
Sure. So this area is I don't want to say it's always overlooked, because when we're thinking of key employees and all of that, it's very, hands-on, and we're thinking through retaining those key employees. But there are some things that come up at times after the deal is signed that could have been discovered during due diligence. So specifically around employee matters, think about things that were grandfathered in that are unwritten, but written, culturally, they're written culturally. So the employees are expecting to happen from, getting lunch every Friday to hitting a sales goal. And it's just an unwritten rule that, they're off for 2 weeks. Who knows? We tell our clients that during due diligence, when you are having those conversations with the employees and you're asking certain questions, those key employees, some things you want to uncover, and it just takes a simple conversation. How's everything going? How do you like it? What are some things you really like about the culture here? Employees, to speak to Miracle's point, they want to keep things the same. They want their normal to be normal. So if there's some, unwritten policy or unwritten procedure that benefits them, they will tell you. And some of this doesn't come out, and the reason for it is because of legal reasons, right? From a legal standpoint, you may not be able to get certain files and all of that. You may have just limited information in the data room. So you definitely want to be having these conversations on the onset as early as possible. And you can specifically ask them too, hey, so what are some things that you guys may get that is just unwritten, and they will more than likely be very happy to tell you what they don't want to lose.
Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of kind of private company M&A where, the owner of the business would be like, there's no way you're talking to my employees. Like, we're going through due diligence. You can look at the numbers, you can look at kind of all the legal documents, but I'm not letting you talk to my employees. How do you overcome that obstacle? Because it must come up more often than not.
Yeah, so to speak to Thomas's point, having an outside person come in and help you manage the assumptions, because you won't know this, but people that are just kind of looking at the paperwork, looking at the policies and procedures, you can pretty much look at documentation, look at how the due diligence process is going, and determine certain things. You can determine that, hey, we don't see a benefits plan. So we have to assume that they have benefits. We have to assume that they have vacation. So let's look at those areas in particular, and let's strategize for them. Let's build out for those specific areas as it's around the people. Because if you can't talk to the employees, then experience is then going to be your best teacher. We know history teaches us everything. We just kind of, you have to have someone experienced, or at least knows about that particular side of things in order to help educate you on what you need to do.
Yeah, so it's about asking the right questions, getting the right data, and then extrapolating from that using either internal or external professionals, but people that know, what that data is kind of representing.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thomas, we talked about getting the integration team. I think we really stressed this, getting the integration team, in as early as possible. But how do you balance between, starting integration early with the, possibility, and I've worked on tons of deals that go to the 11th hour and then they fail to close. So the possibility of a deal, actually not closing. How do you balance that, kind of dynamic?
Yeah, so for me, it's a trade-off, right? There are, and again, for me, this is part of the effective planning and being clear around what do you consider to be critical day one, what's day one discretionary, and what's day two, right? And by prioritizing those key milestones and key integration objectives, you can be really focused on what needs to be done ahead, on closure day one, and what's a slower burner. And for instance, at Keystone, we have like a hybrid approach, right? Where we will mobilize an integration team, but it will be lighter touch. So there's less of a financial commitment up to the point of set milestones throughout an integration deal. So for instance, we know there are typical blockers around regulatory sign-offs, regional regulators approvals, competition authorities. These are all common blockers to deals, or delays to deals, right? So throughout that journey, there are key milestones, and we often align ourselves to those commitments, because if it doesn't get through that part, then you've not spent a ton of money bringing in an external third party to run your integration, but to start that early mobilization of planning. And then as we go through more milestones and more checkpoints, and that deal becomes more concrete and certainly a higher possibility of completion, then we ramp up, keeping focus on the critical day one activities. So, sharing of key corporate policies, the legal integration from, excuse me, legal changes of entity, legal name changes, board of director changes, just some key components across the main functions and work streams. And then we'll develop a roadmap aligned with the key points of an acquisition to start ramping up then into day one discretionary tasks, and then eventually into your day two, full integration, full branding, those kinds of things. So I've always adopted a hybrid approach, and it kind of just softens the blow should that deal not take, not come into fruition, that there's not been a ton of wasted effort either on the buyers, BAU teams, or just financially as well.
Yeah, I love that approach. It takes kind of that balance of, again, one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake, kind of, right? Because the chances of deals sometimes falling apart, unfortunately, is high. So
yeah,
it forces you to think about timing, and with timing, you have to know the end to even work your way back. So I love Thomas's thought process of that.
Yeah, that's great. Great addition there. Chrissy, just checking in with you. I see that we have lots of, lots of little red notifications here on my screen. So that probably indicates we have lots of questions. So I think we're going to get through the last two pillars that I want to talk about, and then we'll get into questions in probably the last 10 minutes. So we can definitely address some of the things that the audience would like to cover. So let's talk about, one of the big reasons that people do acquisitions is because they see potential for synergies. Let's talk about capturing synergies. And on the flip side of that, which I think is equally important, but maybe not as often discussed, the mitigation of risk. So Hope, I'll start on this. Where do you see the opportunities for synergies in the HR function? And on the flip side of that, how do you mitigate risk? And I probably think that one of the bigger risks is employee retention, or as you had mentioned, key employees leaving. So maybe talk about those two things. Where do you see the synergies with regards to HR, and how do you mitigate risk? Maybe some really practical examples there.
Yeah, so synergies for HR it's really specifically around people and processes, of course, technology too. But you want to reduce redundant positions, redundant job functions. I mean, the reason why you merged or acquired a company is definitely for more efficiency, hopefully. And you want to look at those types of positions. Then you want to look at benefits, from benefits to safety to uniforms. I mean, it's a huge overarching approach, but you want to look at every single policy that is duplicated and find a way to simplify it. So this means we have to decide if it's better or if it's worse or if it's okay to have to, right? From standard operating procedures to merging procedures together to changing them. So those are the types of things you want to think about when you think of synergy. And synergy could be an amazing thing because it can also create something new. So be open to that as well. And in terms of mitigating risk, you said it, John, you want to get employees buy-in early on. So we like to say when synergy is happening around policies and processes, and especially people, you want to get people involved. So you want to, survey them, ask them questions, find out the different things that they want. And what that will do is help you with retention, and it will also help you with employee engagement. I mean, it's just true. People want to feel valued and they want to feel like they're a part of a process. They don't want to be told what to do, and if you invite them in to be a part of the planning committee, then you have a better chance at having a happy, productive workforce, which is at the end of the day, what you want.
Yeah, great points, great advice. Thomas, I'm going to ask you the exact same question, but I'm going to ask it with regards to everything outside of HR. So where do you find synergies, and how are you mitigating risks? Let's talk about, let's say top three on both sides: finding synergies and mitigating risks.
Sure. So for me, the classical area of most synergies that we find are around technology, right? So shared corporate technology, like your collaboration tools, one side's got Teams, one side's got Zoom. People have extensive licenses covering their standard office tool suites. Cyber security packages, antivirus, anti-malware. I won't go into all of the different, bits of tooling, but for me, often the biggest quick win and cash saving is around technology synergies. Also from, core corporate platforms like your HR platforms, payroll systems, finance and reporting, or accounting and reporting systems. So by synergizing those, there are some very, very quick wins that can often be found. Around mitigating risk, if I'm honest, the common risk we find is a lack of communication, and it brings straight into Miracle and Hope's wheelhouse there around staff retention. I think it's better to over communicate than under communicate. Mm-hmm. I did see a comment in the chat actually, which is very relevant, around lots of these deals are sort of restricted information, because it's sensitive data. How do you share that data? But there's lots that can be shared, just around company vision, the undertaking and the journey we're about to go on. And just by bringing in your total workforce into that conversation makes a real impact. We find common pitfalls is by under communicating and just bringing in, your top level of leadership. Great, your C-suite's in on the know, but it's, the impact is, how does this impact me, right? I'm a developer in technology, or I'm a HR associate, or I'm, whatever. And it's those guys who go through the stress of acquisition, right? And it is a stressful time for employees. There's a period of uncertainty that can, through an effective communication, be mitigated. And it just helps for that cultural integration, because, no two companies look alike, especially when you start looking at geographical differences, even in the same continent. We've got companies we've supported in the Nordics with the UK acquisition, or, in the Baltics, and vice versa. And just being very aware and cognizant, and having an action plan around the cultural integration, right? There are nuances, particularly within HR, it can at times be a minefield when you're talking around geographical acquisitions, around pension schemes and bonus schemes, which are specific and very bespoke in, some European countries as opposed to the UK. And so you're not going to integrate those from day one, right? That's like a 3 to 5 year strategy to bring those pension schemes in, if at all. So just being cognizant and aware of geographical nuances, and that cultural relationship that must be built between two companies, from as early as possible. And I think just being open in your communications, bringing the sell side into your communications as early as possible. And I always have that as a critical day one exercise. It's not critical because the deal's not going to go through, but it's critical from a cultural perspective, right? We are now one company. That's how we're treating the sell side company. You are now a part of our bigger company and our bigger organization and our family. And that's, for me, the biggest risk that can be quite easily mitigated with just an effective communication plan.
Yeah, for sure. Miracle, Thomas brought up a couple of things there around culture. So maybe let me get your view on the opportunity of synergies in the HR function around culture, and how you can mitigate risk in those things. He also brought up how technology is a quick win, but I would think that changing any technology is going to change the way employees actually execute on things. So maybe touch on those. Firstly, kind of the synergies around culture. And then, how maybe technology needs to be managed when you're, kind of introducing this to a new employee base.
Yeah, culture is so important, and even the company's personality as well. I saw in the comment, someone said about pay and salaries, and that is very, very important. But something even important is the two sales teams coming together and their incentives package look different. So you have one sales teams who, they go out and go for drinks whenever they close a deal. But then you have another sales team who is more traditional, and, you get to pick from the brochure of, a company swag or something like that. And just bringing that synergy together as far as how we incentivize our employees is so crucial, because you don't want to feel like you're taking something away from either side when they cared about something. And the personality of the company is so crucial, because you could have a more traditional suit and tie Monday through Friday. Even on Zoom, you still have a suit and tie on, or you have that relaxed culture who we have Jean Friday. So all of those synergies bringing two organizations together is so, so important. And how do you do this? You ask your employees, what do they care about? Simple as that. You have to be involved and say, do you care? Because you can eliminate a benefit that is so like minimal to you as the executive seat because they're making all the decisions, and it affects your population so much. And it was something that was free. Like, it wasn't a cost savings or anything. You just thought that it was invaluable, but it holds the company together. So those things like that you have to be mindful of and look at when it comes to pulling these people together.
Yeah, so overarching themes I'm hearing is integration teams early, start the integration early in the process, and just the importance of communication, and not just at the C-suite level, but kind of, try to filter those down to all levels of your employee base and your organizational structure. Let's talk about post-acquisition integration here. And we got about 5 minutes to cover this. I know it's an important topic, but I do want to get to questions. So Thomas, I'm going to ask for a quick response around, what are the most critical things that you need to think about, and what are the milestone periods that you typically have? You talked about kind of critical day one, is 90 days another milestone. I often hear about 100-day plan or something, and then also a year, 2 years, 5 years out. So what are most critical things in kind of those and the timeframes on which you should consider them?
Okay, so I don't want to get too bogged down in timeframes at the moment, because I'll be honest, every deal is completely so bespoke, right? We've done a full integration in 17 days for a smaller company. We've had other deals that take 2 years to get to effectively a day two phase, right? So I don't want to get too bogged down, because I don't want the message to be that you have a set time frame that you must achieve this stuff in. I think the key message is mobilize as quickly as possible, as we've said, but excuse me, just so be aggressive. Okay, the quicker you get this stuff done, the better for both companies. Having clear, like, by separating out day one, day two, you can keep focus and a clear roadmap on when you want to achieve, and when it's viable to achieve those key integration steps, right? For me, around key milestones, town halls, right? Never to be underestimated, getting these companies physically together, virtually, obviously now in the world we find ourselves in where applicable, but matching off opposite. So you've got a head of finance in your company, get them acquainted with the head of finance for your sell side company, right? If you've got developer A, match them with developer B, your HR oppos matched off of HR oppos. Start building those key relationships as you go through that process. That's like a key day one exercise for myself, along with really robust communication plans. And for me, day one, pre-day one, I must stress, is top-down buy-in and sign-off on those plans. A plan is not a plan unless you've got commitment from the leadership to roll this plan out. Okay, we're talking resource and capacity forecasting, budget forecasting, PM 101s, which I don't want to bore people with, but we see it time and time again that it just doesn't happen. Strategic vision is great. But if you're dedicating time to creating an integration plan, get sign off from everyone you need to deploy this plan, right? You may have 200 tasks for your director of finance. If your director of finance hasn't seen those 200 tasks, they're not going to get done. And I just want to stress that for everyone on the call. Just buy in, top down, sponsorship to really drive this plan through fruition. Yeah.
Awesome advice. Miracle, quickly get your thoughts on, day one, 90 day, again, time frame. I'm not sure what the time frame is, but, specifically, what do you need to get done almost immediately post-transaction with regards to HR?
Something we like to tell our clients is go ahead and create some type of video with the CEO talking to your employees about why are we doing this integration, and be genuine in the goals and the visions moving forward to build some type of transparency and trust between the CEO or the higher ups through the employees to hear that message. I mean, an email can be, I can say hi and you can still interpret that in a different way. So try to have some type of visual communication to your employees and let them know the reason why. And we're excited, or, we did this because X, Y, and Z. Another thing when it comes to onboarding, you really need to think about the employee experience. And I don't know about you guys, but I went to a new doctor and I had to fill out paperwork again. And I'm like, you guys don't know my address by now? Like, it's the same system. So employees feel that same way. Like, you want me to fill out a new application? Like, am I reapplying? Just simply tell them, hey, the other company didn't provide this information. We have holes. We need this data because we couldn't get it earlier because of, it wasn't available. So just think about, do they have new emails and how does that affect them? Will I use both emails until 30 days? Just be very transparent and mindful of how day one will truly look. Because if those people are coming physically to the office, they want to know, where do I park? Just those simple things, and overly communicate and train people. If you do have to make a major change to the technology, which sometimes happens, you need to train these employees. Don't assume they're just going to know. If there's people who don't know Teams versus Zoom because they're so used to Teams, and it's just like, oh, okay, use Zoom now. No, tell me what this means and how it's going to affect my daily life.
Yeah, great advice. I love the idea of that video communication message. I mean, with the technology today, it's so simple to do. I also like the almost put yourself in an employee's shoes, right? Like, what are all the things that they are worrying about and stressing about when this, acquisition happens? And oftentimes it's some of the small stuff. And your advice around, like, filling out the forms, it's, and we didn't get to this, but, just as important with customers as it would be with employees, right? Like, if your customers are not getting the same level of experience and service, that could be challenging. So another topic for another webinar. But hope this will be the last question, and then we'll get on to questions. So how does a corporation learn from the processes of building and build best practices for future integrations? So a lot of the businesses I work with, and I think a lot of people in the audience are, kind of serial entrepreneurs. They want to do this multiple times. So how do you get better at it?
Yeah, debriefing meetings, very essential. That's a great question too, because we don't always take the time to see what we did wrong. We focus on what we did right. So I definitely think when you are going through the integration phase and you're doing your strategy planning, build performance metrics around certain areas. So for us, it's people, processes, and technology. What makes it successful? Is it successful if you get 80% of the people on one platform in a certain amount of time? Go ahead and build that out and think about the measurements. So when you're thinking through your assumptions, think of those worst case scenarios and say, okay, well, if we can do this in this time, that would be a success for us. If it's not a success, then explore what's a better time frame. But you have to unpack the event. You didn't do everything right. I can promise you there's always areas that you can improve, especially around your people and the experience that you offer them. And some of you do, I'm sure, an amazing job, but unpack the weaknesses. Let's expose them. Let's talk about where we could have done things better, and let's document. And again, that framework that you're creating, you'll be able to use on your next integration, but you want it to still remain flexible, because what worked and what was best practice, it worked for this integration, may not work for the other one. So keep that in mind too, and give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to understand that some things work out and some things don't, and some things are given and some things are not. So it's the same with this.
Yeah, I know when we were doing acquisitions in my business, We definitely were not perfect at the integration phase. So there's a lot of things we could have did better. Would have appreciated your guys' advice and experience on our journey there. Awesome. That's the kind of the end of the formal discussion that I wanted to have. Let's move on to questions. So Chrissy, it looks like we have a lot of kind of comments there. I know you've been working hard in the background, kind of sifting through and really organizing these questions. So maybe can you pose some of the questions that we have from our audience?
Absolutely. The first question comes from Cam, and he's asking, can you highlight key skills and competencies of an integration manager?
I'll throw this to Thomas. I think, Thomas, you were talking about skills and competencies of
sure.
an acquisition team or a manager.
So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, right? For me, there are skills and then competencies, and I think they're two different veins almost. Skills for me, from Keystone, all of our integration managers are project management trained, right? Because it is a large coordination effort that needs to be managed, a lot of stakeholder management, and lots and lots of moving parts that are all happening in parallel. So for me, there has to be a good grounding in project and program management, depending on the size and complexity of the deal. Competencies, for me, acquisition is a competency in itself, right? Our integration managers are trained in post-merger acquisitions. There are courses out through various companies and training providers that you can look, and that is a skill set in itself. There are lots of nuances that, whilst you may be a finance manager, if you haven't gone through the acquisition process before, there are always curveballs that you may not have encountered before. So for us, those are our foundational pillars of training: project or program management and integration management as a specialty. But it's lots of good coordination and solid stakeholder management, because this is a massive period of change for everyone. So being able to manage people effectively and have those difficult conversations, because not everybody wants to integrate. Yeah.
So some people skills in there too, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Chrissy, next question.
The next one comes from Gus. He asks, M&A transactions with private companies on the sell side are often confidential and so not often possible to have discussions with employees on those hidden benefits of their roles. In this case, then, presumably, does the buyer have to rely on the seller's disclosure with appropriate warranties without discussions with employees?
Hope, I think you touched on that a little bit, but I'll let you kind of expand on that. And it's a good point, because I think there's, we can mitigate risk through purchase and legal agreements as well, but I'll let you jump on that.
So the point that I was coming from was obviously from the HR standpoint. So yes, you could, your approach could be to get the seller to disclose certain agreements. We've definitely done that. If certain agreements, so you could say, if certain agreements like, vacation or, list out those things, those benefits, if they aren't disclosed, then we won't, assume any of the risk for that. We won't assume any of that. What ends up happening though, because that's definitely an option, and we've done that before. What ends up happening is that you then don't get the buy-in of the employees. So if in the event you have to put a disclosure in that says that, you still want, you do get the agreement signed and you have access to the employees, those are still conversations you want to have, because whether or not you're going to honor them, you want to know what culture your organization is now, dealing with. What are some of those things? Let's uncover it. So the point is not necessarily to assume it and do it. It's to know what's going on, what was going on, what was happening culturally, what was happening with your benefits. So I hope I explained it correctly. But from a legal standpoint, yes, you should definitely, if it's not, if it didn't come up in legal discussions in your employee matters on your purchase sale agreement, and you're not, buying to do it, then of course you, from a legal standpoint, may not have to do it, but you still want to get your employees buy-in.
Yeah, that's great. Miracle, you want to add to that real quick?
Since you put me on the spot, sure. I was just gonna reassure that person that asked that question is you still have time. Yes, in a perfect world, we would love to have that information beforehand, interview our the people and all of that. But if you don't have that, you can be very creative. And once that deal is finalized, and then you have that document or those policies, and you need to have that integration manager specifically working on just that. So it may be a little delayed, and you can plan out what you think, but as soon as you get it, you have to activate.
Really great point. I think maybe we'll end it here too. But on I think start early. Let me just re-summarize. Start early. Get the integration team involved early. A lot of communication around the processes from all kind of areas. And integration takes time. You can't get everything right on day one. So some things might take longer, and you might not be able to uncover those during the due diligence or kind of the purchase and sale agreement phase. But identify those areas, try to mitigate the risk around them, and then implement strategies even after the fact to execute on them. Hey, Miracle, Hope, Thomas, I'm so grateful that you were able to join me today. I think we delivered a ton of value for our audience. I am super appreciative to our audience for joining us as well. And we've provided everyone's contact information. If you want to reach out to them, please do. Again, thanks everyone. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to finding a time to work with you guys in the future.
Thank you.
Great to speak to everyone today.